If you've been watching esports for a long time, then you know that things used to be pretty scuffed.
So we're here at day 4, the day that was never meant to happen. It is the Extended World Playoffs, and as you can see, the construction is going on behind us right now.
From extra days to canceled games to lag, esports broadcasting has never been easy.
Talking about this game though, let's go ahead and take a look at Champion Select because we saw a lot of mid lane focus in terms of bans as well as picks.
Oh, there's a lot of us.
You know what? This is better. Let's just keep it on
keep that one up there. Oh, there we go.
So boring.
But during COVID, things got a lot worse.
So when we started on the LPL feed, we were going through VOOV software, kind of very similar to Zoom. We were casting with no audio whatsoever, so no in-game audio, and our 144p, because the signal has to go from China to us and back, and there's plenty of examples from 2021 spring where I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm like, I just see colors. There's no definitive shapes, there's just a color, and I'm assuming it's this champion.
You see, it's one thing to broadcast an esports event from a studio or an arena with professional equipment. But it is another thing entirely to do it from your bedroom. But Riot is trying to change all that with a new $20 million studio in Dublin, Ireland, as part of what they're calling Project Stryker. There's never really been anything like it in esports, and it can do things no other studio ever has.
I cannot tell you how happy I was when I saw this place. And I did the tour here yesterday, and I was floored. It exceeded every expectation that I possibly had.
So how did all of this happen? And more importantly, if you're just a viewer at home who's either deeply or casually interested in the future of Riot Esports, why should you care? Okay, so before we start talking about Project Stryker, I just wanted to take a second to actually thank both Cisco and Riot Games for sending one of our teams out to Dublin, Ireland to see this studio. We got to shoot B-roll and do interviews and basically just capture the magic of this thing so that we could bring it to you, the viewers. This video would quite literally have not been possible without their help, so thank you. Riot has actually been broadcasting a lot of their biggest events remotely for years now. From Worlds to MSI, a lot of the tournaments you've watched have featured casters halfway, or sometimes all the way, around the world. But that hasn't always been easy. In fact, sometimes it has been a shit show.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the play-ins. Mark just wasn't ready for you.
And even as League of Legends casters and broadcasting teams tried to iron out the challenges of remote production, technical staff behind the scenes knew that there was another challenge on the horizon. One that boasted some particularly precise gunplay.
The idea, the genesis of Project Stryker, you have to actually go back to before the pandemic. We're in what we call IT lab. It's kind of our innovation lab in our campus in Los Angeles. And this is before anyone outside of Riot had seen what would become our next game, or Valorant. I remember sitting there and watching two of the engineers on the team that I support put in hours, I mean like 6 hours straight, of just playing this pre-alpha build of what would become Valorant. And I watched them get really invested in this new IP. And it kind of dawned on me, if this is good, it's grabbing their attention. What's gonna happen if this becomes an esport?
So, Riot's global head of technology, the homie Scott Adametz, who you may remember from our video about The Realm, went to his boss, a sir by the name of John Needham, and proposed that they spend, well, a lot of money to fix this problem. Then, they got to work. But there were a lot of details to figure out. And though Riot had run English broadcasts from their studios in LA and Berlin, it was clear early on that they'd have to build something new, since the LA studio needed to continue to run the LCS, and Berlin needed to continue to run the LEC, and so on.
Take the world, carve it into 3 8-hour shifts, and then place a production center strategically in each of those time zones. So now that unlocks being able to produce in daylight hours, or as close to daylight hours, a normal time, per facility. We call it follow the sun, where a production can start in one locale, transfer to the next, and continue, and then transfer to the third before we get back to the first.
But while Riot was still nailing out the details, COVID hit, and the world turned upside down. Suddenly, the broadcast teams trying to bring you your favorite leagues had to work from home. Casters went from working in a state-of-the-art studio to their bedroom. And for some leagues, like the LPL, that control room was halfway around the world.
Where's the action, Penguin? Oh, well, apparently I lost Penguin, which I didn't know, so Lyric is back once again with the solo cast. I guess it sounded like I was talking to no one.
Here's the thing though, after bouncing around from studios to home setups around the globe for over 2 years of pandemic, that LPL crew got pretty good at it.
This is going to sound really weird, but we had Ender, Christy Frierson, over for 2021 summer, and he came over to me at one point right towards the end of the remote broadcasting, put his hand on my shoulder and goes, "You know what, Oisin, it's not that scuffed," and then just walked away. So that was probably the nicest thing I've had about the remote broadcasting.
But when they were staring down the prospect of going remote yet again this spring, burnout finally started to set in. They knew they wanted to get together for playoffs, but that because of China's tight COVID restrictions, there would be no feasible way of it happening there.
Unfortunately, it kind of got to a point where we were running out of time to make a decision, and I just put my hand up in a meeting and said, "We can do this in my house." And everyone just kind of went, "Can we?" I was like, "Maybe." Maybe we can.
And eventually Oisin was just like, "Hey, look, why don't you just come to my house? My roommate is out. I've got the whole apartment here. I've got it downstairs we can use as the analyst desk. The couch can be set up there. I've got full casting equipment set up in the top stairs so we can actually all be in the one spot." And it all kind of just fell together from there, where I had some equipment that I could bring with me. Munchables brought a whole bunch of his gear with them as well. And it meant that we could actually, between ourselves, kind of higgledy-piggledy, get enough bits together so it could all work.
Welcome, one and all, to my front room. I am Oisin, Dagda, Ox. We got this setup going.
Yeah.
I'm super happy with it, not gonna lie.
It works. It works. It's functional.
We pulled out some of the stops. Yeah.
And look, let's put some respect on these guys. They had to slap this whole thing together by themselves with very little outside tech support. I sure as could not do that. Maybe Colton could.
It was an ordeal, I will say, but it was very fun to kind of figure out what is literally like the bare bones of like, how do I make this work with as little professional equipment as possible.
So yeah, casting over the past couple of years has ranged from scuffed to arguably less scuffed. The thing is, Riot knew they had a solution. They just had to build it. They chose Dublin as the first location thanks to its convenient time zone location. Though, let's be honest, I'm sure the steady, never-ending supply of dry stout didn't hurt. After sharing a few pints, they quickly got to work scouting properties. And the place they landed on might not be what you'd expect. You see, the property wasn't exactly famous for its production space. It was known for having, at one point, the single largest disco ball in Europe.
For me, it was surreal. So the studio itself used to be of the Ireland's biggest nightclub. So I used to go to that nightclub. So kind of walking in and being like, that's where I ordered a drink. That's where I met my friend. That's where he fell over. It's a very weird kind of surreal experience.
But when we kind of got in here, although it was largely closed in from what you see now, it was kind of like, oh my God, there's an atmosphere that I really feel could work. So a lot of the atrium behind us, this was all closed in. You never seen into the spaces. And I remember just coming in and be like, no, trust me, I'm going to send you loads of videos and photos. And they were like, still don't get it. And like, I even think just in the last few days of people coming in here, it's not until they walk in, they go, oh my God, I get it.
And then things started to move, like really fast.
29th of July, we got the keys. And by the 10th of September, we were breaking ground. So a lot of what we had to front load, know when we were going through the leasing process, was make sure that we had the local planning authorities and whatnot all lined up so that we could do the due diligence, get them on board, and really hit the ground running once we had the lease over the line.
The $20 million transformation of the space from nightclub to studio happened in just 6 months, with technology and construction workers operating in the same spaces at the same times. Now, you might be thinking, it's a fucking studio, Dimitri, right? Like, whoop-de-doo. This is Rito we're talking about. Like, surely they've constructed plenty of cool-looking broadcast rooms before. What exactly is Project Stryker? Why does it sound like something straight out of Metal Gear? And how can one building even start to fix all of these problems? Let's start with connection. You see, traditionally, esports broadcasts have used this thing called SDI to transmit signals. Hold on, I actually read up on this just to spite Colton. Don't cut away yet. Just give me a chance to gather my thoughts.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
Wait, what? Why am I even in this episode? You do know how many experts we interviewed for this episode, right? Well, anyways, SDI, which stands for Serial Digital Interface, is a type of physical coaxial cable used to transmit video and audio feeds for a production at some pretty remarkable speeds over distances that would make your run-of-the-mill HDMI cable shudder. But traditional sports don't generally have most of their production halfway around the world from where the event is happening. Every Riot event essentially faces the Herculean task of setting up their broadcast for something more akin to the Olympics. That's why, instead of the typical setup, Riot decided to run everything in their production studio through an internal network, using something called spine leaf architecture that would allow everything in the studio to run over these guys. Or fiber. Or direct attached copper, but I don't have either of those. We actually talked a bit about this in our episode about why streamers will sometimes use two PCs, but this is in a whole different universe. Pumping all these high bandwidth audio and video feeds over a purpose-built internal network is one thing, but once you introduce a signal coming from countries away over the internet, things can get a little dicey. Riot, thanks in no small part to Cisco, built what is in essence their own ISP just to help tackle this problem. And with the help of some fancy new video codecs and... Alright, look, I might know what I'm talking about, but I'm gonna let the actual experts handle the rest. Okay?
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
It was a big risk, and something that other broadcasters are honestly still not really all that ready to do. But when it came together, man, that was fast.
We just did an event in Singapore where we were transmitting signals from Singapore to Dublin. The path we took was across the Pacific, the United States, and the Atlantic. So they were going 2/3 of the way around the world, and we were still able to get return signals to Singapore in about 1/3 of a second. You could sit there and watch a graphic animate on the stage, and a split second later, you would see that animation come back on the screen. For a lot of broadcasters, that's normal. You're used to seeing that level of delay, but that's just to the truck and back on site. It's not going from Singapore to Dublin and back.
It's the first time, I've seen anything like that. And honestly, this is miles ahead of anything that anyone's doing in traditional broadcast. I saw that shot and I was just like, my heart was racing.
So broadcasts won't have the kind of massive signal delays we experienced during the pandemic. But just in case, right now is the time you're starting to, nod off a little bit, Riot Direct is more than just speedy signals. It will actually make your games, yes, your games, run better.
Riot Direct is entirely powered by Cisco, and it has got hundreds of points of presence all over the world and terabits of edge capacity. We are a small user. The bigger user is the games. Riot built that because the way that our game actually functions, it's the first type of traffic to be dropped, is the type of traffic that our games utilize. There's a reason for that. It makes the game better. So Riot built this ISP to be able to say to other ISPs around the world, give us our traffic destined for our game servers, we'll protect it. And it'll get it off of your network, which frees you up to do more Netflix streaming or whatever they're doing. We'll protect that traffic all the way to the game server and back. we're actually tapping into that network here and in all the other facilities.
And through a new technology called JPEG XS, feeds going out to any remote staff will be visually lossless, meaning we won't see any 140p casting feeds that play-by-plays can't decipher. But why should you, sitting there at home, care about this flashy new studio? Well, Stryker isn't all behind the scenes.
So when a person at home starts to watch shows that come through this facility, you'll actually start to see more things added to productions that traditionally we wouldn't be able to fit, or wouldn't be able to, had to make choices and concessions. We don't have to do that anymore. So I'm the most excited to see what comes next in augmented reality, mixed reality environments, and then the idea that resolution is no longer a limit for us. We don't have to be in 1080p. 4K it's 2022, we should be doing this in 4K. And the best part about being an esports company is our games can render in whatever resolution we want them to. So 8K is not that far off.
And what exactly do we mean by AR? Well, if you aren't a dyed-in-the-wool League fan who remembers the Elder Dragon at Worlds 2017, it's actually been showing up more and more in esports.
AR is a big portion of our shows. It's augmented reality. What we do with that is we bring elements that you can't see in the real world, but that integrate with production seamlessly. So when you're watching the broadcast, you can see a character from the game on stage, or you can see certain elements. It doesn't have to be, a rendered image. It's almost like another piece of the stage that's not really there.
Now, Dublin is the first of 3 Stryker studios. They're in construction on a warehouse in Seattle right now, and there will be a 3rd location somewhere in Asia that they're still scouting. And the bottom line is that we don't really know what the future holds. But there's no question that Project Stryker represents a massive investment by Riot in the future with help from Cisco's technology. We've gone from early esports broadcasts held together with duct tape and faith to a $20 million state-of-the-art production studio, one that will help solve years of challenges and make remote broadcasting possible from virtually anywhere. With big games in development in a bunch of genres, Stryker could set them up for splashy productions across a range of titles, including ones we haven't really seen before. And if you're someone who just loves esports, that's pretty cool.
Fun fact, I actually went there when it was a nightclub.
Did you actually? That's crazy. I'm sure you told them that when you went there. You left the part out that the last time you were there, you were physically shoving a man, screaming, you f***ing what, mate? Oh, thanks, bruv, thank you. Thanks for the cheeky Guinnesses, loves.